It's given me the opportunity to spend some time with my brother and my sister-in-law, and I've enjoyed that very much, and I'm glad they're here. By the way, my brother has admonished me each night and has shared with me that I've preached a little bit longer than I should have. I think 8 minutes, he said, longer than I should have preached each night, but we're preachers' kids, so we understand that. Mark chapter 5. I grew up in Sunday school every Sunday. It was part of our church experience, part of what we did. And back in the flannelgraph days, the younger generation has no idea what flannelgraph is. You don't get it. But there's some of us that we can remember flannel. You remember flannelgraphs? And because of being in Sunday school and having teachers that really poured themselves into cutting out the figures and applying the flannel and putting up on the board, there are many biblical accounts, especially from the life and times of Jesus Christ, that I cannot remember not knowing. I mean, I picked them up so early in life due to dedicated Sunday school teachers that it was as if the rest of my thinking just kind of formed around them, and that's good, but it also comes at a price. Because sometimes you get so familiar with something that when you read it in the Bible, you just kind of fast forward to the end. You know it. You know the story. You know where it's going. You know where it ends. And along the way, you overlook some of the details that are really important. Kind of like the way the Secret Service overlooked some details that were really important. And sometimes we're like that. We know where the story's going. We've heard it. We're so familiar with it. We can tell it ourselves. We know the flow, and we look to the end, and we just kind of miss some of the things that exist in the middle. So I want you to look at this extended account with me, and it is an extended account. It's a day, or at least a part of the day in the life of Jesus, and it's busy. I mean, Jesus is going full steam ahead in this text. There's none stop. In fact, the context behind the text, before we start reading, what has happened before we pick up reading is Jesus has just been engaged with the man that we refer to as the maniac of Gadara. I mean, you may remember Jesus meets this man, and he's possessed by so many demons that when Jesus asks the demon's name, the response is, just call us Legion. There's so many of us in here, just call us Legion. There's no need for us to begin to give you individual names because there's just so many of us here. And Jesus has encountered him, and you may remember something about him. He was untamed. He was untamable. It wasn't that they hadn't tried. The community had tried. He was living in the tombs. And if you've ever been to the site of the maniac of Gadara, the tombs that he was in, it's literally up on a cliff just on you can see the Sea of Galilee, and the cliff goes up, and there's these caves that are up in there, and that were used as tombs in those days, and that's where he was. It's rough, it's barren, it's inhospitable, and that's where he lived. That's where Jesus encounters him. That's where Jesus casts the demons out, and just as soon as that has happened, I mean that has just happened, he gets in the ship. They come to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. They get out. Look with me, if you will, Mark chapter 5. Are you there? Look at verse 22. I've asked you to stand a couple times, and you didn't act like you appreciated it, so just stay seated, but stay with me, okay? Verse 22. In fact, verse 21, and when Jesus was passed over again, that's the ship. He's just the maniac of Gadara has just been behind, passed over the ship, comes to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and much people have gathered. And behold, there cometh one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name. And when Jairus, saw him, Jesus, Jairus, fell at Jesus' feet and besought Jesus greatly, saying, My little daughter lieth at the point of death. I pray thee, come and lay thy hands on her, that she may be healed, and she shall live. And Jesus went with them. And much people followed him and thronged him, and a certain woman which had an issue of blood 12 years, and had suffered many things of physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was nothing bettered, but rather grew worse. When she heard of Jesus, came in the press behind, and touched his garment, for she said, If I may touch but his clothes, I shall be whole. And straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that plague. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned about in the press and said, Who touched my clothes? And his disciples said unto him, Thou seest the multitude thronging thee, and sayest thou, Who touched me? I mean, they're a little bit incredulous. Jesus, who didn't touch you? I mean, everybody's just kind of crowded up around you. It's we just got off the boat, and there was a crowd where we left, and we just got off the boat. There was a crowd right there, and at first there was Jairus, and then there's the crowd following us, and then there's this woman, and all this is taking place in Jesus, verse 32. And he looked around about to see her that had done this. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what was done in her, came and fell down before him and told him all the truth. And he said unto her, Daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace and be whole of thy plague. And while he yet spake, there came from the ruler of the synagogue's house, Jairus' house. That's where they're headed to. There came certain which said, Thy daughter is dead. Why troublest thou the master any further? And as soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he saith unto the ruler of the synagogue, to Jairus, Be not afraid, but only believe. And he suffered no man to follow him, save Peter and James and John the brother of James. And he cometh to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and seeth the tumult, and them that wept and wailed greatly. And when he was come in, he saith unto them, Why make ye this ado, and weep? The damsel is not dead, but sleepeth. But they laughed him to scorn. But when he had put them all out, he taketh the father and the mother of the damsel, and them that were with him, and entered in where the damsel was lying. And he took the damsel by the hand, and said unto her, Talitha cumi, which is, being interpreted, Damsel, I say unto thee, arise. And straightway the damsel arose and walked, for she was of the age of 12 years. And they were astonished, and with great astonishment. And he charged them straitly that no man should know it, and commanded that something should be given her to eat. And that's just a sliver of a day in the life and times of Jesus. I mean, that's just a rapid succession of events. It didn't take up the whole day. I mean, it was just a portion of the day wasn't over. The day wasn't spent. It was just a portion of the day. And let me just confess. When I come to this text, I start reading it, and I know where it's going. I know that we're going to end up at Jairus' house, and I know that the crowd is going to say she's dead, and Jesus is going to say she's just asleep, and he's going to raise her from the dead. Because my tendency is just to race to the end of the account, I tend to miss the details that live in the middle. The details that kind of rise to the surface if you just back up and take your time. There's a lot of things happening. But I want you to notice what the details had to say to us about Jesus and time. Just a sliver of Jesus' day. But they say something to us about Jesus and time. And this may sound trite to you. I hope it doesn't. It might. If it does, I ask you to bear with me and consider it, even though it sounds a bit trivial. First of all, there's this. The details share with us that regardless of what the problem is, Jesus has the answer. Regardless of what it is, I know we've heard that. It just sounds like a religious slogan sometimes. Just kind of rolls off our back, and we think, well, I've got problems, and my problems aren't spiritual. I've got some real problems. They're practical. They're day to day. They're dealing with life and the demands of life and the flow of money and the payment of bills and the relationships and I've got real problems, and I'm not sure that religion is the answer. I didn't say religion was the answer, but I'll share you with this: Jesus has the answer. Regardless of what the struggle is, just in this little piece of the pie, at Jesus' day, he encounters multiple human beings that have distinct and different problems. I mean, first of all, there's the maniac of Gadara, and his problem is spiritual. He is possessed with demonic beings. How did they get in there? I do not know. What happened in his life before he met Jesus that made him a host to the demons, I can only imagine. Somewhere along the way, his lifestyle made himself a receiving host. Someone that was a willing host of those demonic beings. They had taken him places he didn't want to go. They had done things to him he didn't want to do. His problem was a spiritual problem, and he needed a spirit that was stronger than the demons to expel them from his body and to spiritually change his life. Jesus had the answer. But then he meets Jairus. And we just kind of read over it. Did you pick up on the fact that Jairus was the ruler of the synagogue? You got that, right? But just stop for a moment and just ponder what that means. That means in that community of Capernaum, where the synagogue was, that's where they're at, that Jairus was the leading Jewish religious authority. The religious authorities that viewed Jesus as their enemy, that's the side Jairus is on. That's who he works for. Those are the ones that he is accountable to. Those are the ones that expect him to toe the party line and to be in that community what they want him to be. But you understand, he's encountered a problem. The problem is his daughter is on her deathbed and he has run out of solutions. He's run out of answers. He's got a problem that's bigger than he is, and so he's going to break party lines. He's going to step outside his box, his comfort zone. He's going to violate the wishes of his superiors. He's going to do what he perhaps would if he had asked permission. Can I go get Jesus to help my daughter? And it said, not on your life can you do that. Don't you dare. I mean, he's got problems. The biggest one is his daughter, but he's got problems. He's dealing with the emotions of his daughter perhaps dying and his bosses drawing a box around him. And if he's going to help his daughter, he's got to reach outside the box. If he reaches outside the box, my goodness, what does he do? How does he pay his bills? How does he take care of his livelihood? How does he eat? How does he take care of his family? Where do they live? He's in a bad place. You can see it, can't you? He's in a really bad place. I mean, if he doesn't go to Jesus, then what's going to happen to his daughter? I mean, Jesus is his last chance. If he does go to Jesus, what's going to happen to his daughter, to his family, to his entire life? I mean, he's in a bad place. He's got emotional problems. He's got grieving problems. He really has some real practical issues working. And guess what? Jesus had the answer. Along the way, they encounter the woman. We don't know her name. Jesus knew. He didn't share it with us. But we don't know her name. She has a disease. She has an illness. She has a blood problem. And she has snuck up behind Jesus and she's touched his garment. She's convinced herself, if I can just touch his garment, I'll be whole. She does, and she is. And listen, the text says she's got some real issues as well, because she has spent everything she has in pursuit of an answer. And as a result, she's exhausted her resources. She has nothing left, and she's still sick. She's got financial problems. Listen, one had emotional problems, and then there's the financial problems, and one had, the manic of Gadara had spiritual problems. So you got spiritual problems, you got emotional problems, you've got financial problems, and then you've got terminal problems. Because there's a 12-year-old girl that's laying in bed in the process of dying. And Jesus had the answer to every one of their problems. We come to Jesus with all kinds of problems, and they're different. My problems aren't yours. Your problems aren't mine. And sometimes we kind of look at religion, we look at Jesus, and we say, you know, I get it. I get it that if your problem is going to heaven, then Jesus he's your help. And I get it if you're on the doorstep of death, then yes, you want to make sure that you're right with Jesus. But I've got real problems, as if I've got problems bigger than that. But that's the way we think about it. I've got different problems. I'm juggling finances. I'm trying to make people happy in my life. I'm trying to keep relationships going on. I've got hard questions in life, and I don't always know what to do, and I need some help along the way, and I'm struggling with my social position. I'm struggling with my friends. I'm struggling with my wife, with my husband, or with my family, or the kids have just gone off course altogether. And I've got real struggles. And I want you to know something. Whatever your struggles are, Jesus has the answer. He does. The emotional, he's got the answer. The financial, he's got the answer. Is it physical? He's got the answer. Is it terminal? He's got the answer. Whatever the problem is, Jesus is the answer every time. All the time. Jesus has the answer. It sounds too fantastic perhaps to say that, but consider that he gives us principles to base our decisions on. Guidelines, living life. Some of them are hard. Some of them are really hard. We read them, we say, he really didn't mean that. That's our way of saying, I don't intend to live up to that, so it makes me feel better if I say he didn't mean it. But it's because sometimes, for example, when Jesus says, you've heard to love your friends and hate your enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies. It would be hard enough if he stopped there, but he didn't stop there. He went on and he said, bless those that curse you. Stop for a moment. That word bless, that gets translated, the word that it gets translated from, shares the same root word as our word eulogy. Have you ever given a eulogy? You ever stood up at a friend or family member's funeral? Maybe the family asked you, would you say something? Would you stand up and you'd speak? Whenever a family comes to me and asks me if I would do the funeral for their loved one, especially if I did not really know them, if I didn't have a relationship with them, it's just somebody in the community that needs a preacher, and I'm the preacher they happen to find. I often will ask, is there somebody in your family? Because I didn't know them. And since I didn't know them, I can tell you what the Word of God says, but I didn't know their life. Is there somebody in the family, is there some friend that could stand up and say something about the loved one? And generally there's somebody. And so they stand up and share the eulogy. Maybe that's been you sometime. Let me ask you a question. When you're giving the eulogy, is it a time to drag out the bad stuff out of the closet? Or is it time to just remember the good stuff? Yeah, because that's what eulogy means, by the way. That's why it gets translated as bless. Because it means to say good things. Mothers were bringing their babies to Jesus. The apostles said, don't bring your babies. Jesus said, don't keep them from bringing their babies. Bring your babies. And what they're asking Jesus to do, will you hold my baby and will you bless him? Will you say good things over my baby? Jesus said, you've got an enemy. And your enemy doesn't like you. They're cursing you. They're saying bad things about you. They're going around, and what they're saying isn't nice, and they are eroding the confidence that others have in you, and they're attacking you from the shadows, and your knee-jerk reaction is, I'll beat them to the punch. I mean, I'll tell them, I'll make sure everybody, and Jesus says, no. You find yourself in that position. He's got the answer. Bless those that curse you. And we want to say, oh, he didn't mean that. Oh, no, he really didn't mean that. And then he went on. Do good to those who hate you. And then he went further. Pray for those that despitefully use you and persecute you. And if you're like me, you want to say, oh, I'll pray for them all right. Yeah. But understand something. Whatever the problem is, Jesus really does have the answer. It may be with the nuts and bolts of just daily living among other human beings. It may be running a business. It may be with the relationships of the family. It may involve our church life. Regardless of what the issue is, Jesus really does have the answers all the time. All the times. I mean, he has principles for us to live by. He gives us power to endure the hard times. He gives us the promise of a better day someday to remind us that we don't always stay here, that there is something on the other side of this life, and we're not living for the here and now, but we're to live in the here and now for the then and there. I mean, listen, whatever the problem is, Jesus has the answer. Regardless of what your problem is, you quit looking at other places and just turn to God and say, God, I need some help. I need some answers. I need some guidance. I need you to take me by the hand and guide me through this problem. I've tried it myself and it's got me nowhere. I've listened to others and they haven't really helped me. Jesus, I need you. Because he has the answers all the time. He's the answer. But we learn something else about Jesus in time. In the details of the account. We learn Jesus always has time. We kind of touched on it as we read the account. Have you ever just been overwhelmed? Has your phone ever rung one time too many? And you thought, I'm turning this off. I'm leaving work. I'm checking out. I'm going somewhere else today. Overwhelmed. I've been there. You've been there. Your resources taxed. You thought to yourself, if one more person taps me on the shoulder and asks me for help, I'm done. I'm finished. I don't have anything left to give. I need to go somewhere and recuperate myself. Here's Jesus. He goes to Gadara. There's the maniac. He encounters the maniac. It's not a fast. It's not a few minutes or 30 minutes that he spends with them. He spends some time with the maniac of Gadara. He kicks Legion out, and they invade the swine and run down the slope into the Sea of Galilee and drown themselves. He engages in conversation with the maniac. There's so much conversation that the maniac says, well, he's no longer a maniac now. He's a man in his right mind. He says, I want to go where you're going. Jesus says, no, I want you to go back home, and I want you to tell them what I've done for you. And they have this conversation. That's behind them. Gets on a ship, goes to the other side of the sea, same day, gets off the boat. Here's Jairus. It's as if Jairus has been waiting for Jesus to get there. Capernaum, by the way, was the hub of Jesus' activity in North Galilee. And so he's expecting Jesus is going to come back. He's been here. He operates out of here. He'll come back here. He's waiting for Jesus. When Jesus gets there, he says, Jesus, I need you. I need you to come to my house. Jesus is going to his house. As they're going to his house, suddenly there's this woman, and she's tugging at the hem of his garment. And listen, Jesus, if I had been Jesus, praise God I'm not, but if I was, I would have said, you folks got to get in line. You got to get in line. I'm a bit overwhelmed. But he's Jesus. He's God in flesh. He's never overwhelmed. Got all the resources in the world. And he had time for the maniac. And he had time for Jairus. He had time for the woman. He's got time for Jairus' daughter. He's got time. He's not rushed. He's not hurried. He's not hectic. He's God. No need to be any of those things. He knew before he got off the boat that Jairus was waiting. He knew before he started following Jairus that this woman was going to come up and touch the hem of his garment. He knew. He turns around and asks, who touched me? Not because he didn't know, because he's inviting her to step out of the crowd and share what has happened to her. I mean, but he has time. And when I read the text and I stop and just take in the details, I try to put myself in Jairus' shoes. Because if I put myself in Jairus' shoes and we're going, I've caught Jesus, I positioned myself so that when he got back, I was right there to intercept him before anybody else did. And I told him my problem, and he agreed to come, and we headed to my house where my 12-year-old girl is on her deathbed, and the crowd is really getting in the way because they're surrounding us, and I'm trying to hurry things up if I'm Jairus. I'm trying to move things along and make room in the crowd. And then this woman comes up behind Jesus and touches him, and Jesus stops. He stops. He stops moving towards Jairus' house and Jairus' daughter. He stops. And he starts talking to the woman. And I don't know about you, but if I'm Jairus, I'm trying to move Jesus on. We got places to go. Lady, if you will just stay here, I will send him back to you. But we got to go to my house. Jesus doesn't have time for you right now. If I'm Jairus, that's what I'm saying. But Jesus had time for the maniac. He had time for Jairus. He's got time for the woman with the issue of blood. And he's got time for Jairus' daughter. He's got time. Jesus is never too busy for you. In the midst of a hectic season of life, you can turn to Jesus and you may say, I feel as if I am overwhelmed, and he knows exactly how you feel, but he's not overwhelmed. He understands. He's got time. Listen, humanism insists that there is no God, and they hedge their bet by saying, but if there is a God, he is far too busy running the universe to have time to be involved in the concerns of our lives, of folks like you and I. What they miss is that not only is God real, but God is so big that he can run all the universe And at the same was so big that you never exhaust his resources. You never ask him for too much. You never knock on his door too often. You never have taken your knee to him in prayer too many times. He never says, I'm going to get to that. Leave me alone for a while. He never says, I don't have time right now. He never says, come back another day. Never. He always has time. You wake up in the middle of the night. And your mind is plagued with some issue. And he's got time. He's got time. You lay in bed trying to get to sleep. And you can't chase it down hard enough because your mind is consumed with some problem. And he's got time. You finally drift off to sleep and you wake up the next morning. And before you get out of bed, your rest is disturbed by the reminder of that problem you went to sleep with. He's got time. When you slow down and consider the details, it's rush, it's hectic. From a human perspective, Jesus' day is just it's just boom, 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 boom. There's the maniac. There's Jairus. There's the woman. There's Jairus' daughter. There's the messengers that come and say, it's too late. She's dead. I mean, there's all these things taking place. And it seems as if it's just a hectic moment. But Jesus is absolutely in control. He's never at wit's end. And he always has time. Each problem, he's got time. Maniac got time. Jairus got time. Woman who has an issue, but got time. Going to Jairus' house to meet his daughter, got time. Listen, when you have an issue in life, never doubt that he cares and never doubt that he has time. By the way, we could learn something from Jesus. Sometimes I get so hectic that my phone rings and my knee-jerk is, I really don't have time to help you right now. I need to learn something from Jesus. That when somebody reaches out to me for help, no time to be hectic. Throw on the brakes on everything else and just stop. Jennifer refuses to ride with me. The local convenience store in our community, 7-Star. My wife, Jennifer, will send me sometimes to 7-Star. She refuses to ride with me to 7-Star because she says, you will go in there and come out 30 minutes later. She says, you go in there and you have your talk to me sign across your forehead. But what happens when I go into 7-Star is I encounter a part of our community that doesn't have a church relationship. They don't know a pastor. They don't know any spiritual person. And so I walk in, and if somebody's got a problem, then what I've learned is, don't run from it. This may be what my whole day was meant for. This may be what it was all about. I have to avoid the tendency to see it as an interruption. I don't know how you are, but I know how I am. And when I leave my house, I've got a list. I've got a list. It's either written down or it's in my mind or it's on my phone. I've got a list. Here's what I need to do. I need to go to the hospital and see this person. I need to go to the nursing home and see this person. I need to pick up something for the church while I'm in town. I also need to pick up something for my family. I mean, I've got my list, and here's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to leave point A, and I'm going to go point B, and I'm on a mission. Are you like that? I mean, I'm on a mission. I'm going, and somewhere along the mission, somebody calls, or I encounter somebody has a problem, somebody has an issue, and my tendency is, I don't have time for you. I'm on a mission. Don't you know I have a list, and I've got to get to the next thing on my list. But it could be that the only reason I am where I am is because God has put me there to minister to somebody in a time of need. Throw on the brakes, folks. We're not staying here. We're leaving this place. Don't sacrifice the opportunity to do something eternal in somebody else's life because you're doing something temporary in your life. Jesus always had time. Jesus in time. Every time he was the answer, no matter what the problem was. He had time. No matter how busy the day was, he had time for each and every one of us, everyone in the text. And I want you to notice at least one last thing. He is always in time. You read the account, it doesn't seem like he's in time. If I was Jairus, when the messengers came and encountered them, after Jesus has stopped, delayed their progress by having a conversation with the woman who had an issue of blood. And he stopped, and who are you? And he has this conversation with her, and if I'm Jairus, and then after we leave, after we finally get that behind us, and we're moving back towards my house and my daughter again, and there come the messengers, and they say, your daughter is dead. Don't trouble Jesus anymore. If I'm Jairus, I would have been thinking, if you had not stopped and talked to that woman, we might have got there in time. If I was Jairus, I would have been thinking, if you had parted the crowd of people like you parted the Red Sea once upon a time, we could have got to my house on time. If I was Jairus, I would have been thinking, Jesus, you're just not in time. But he was. He was in time. Sometimes life falls to pieces, and we may never say it with our lips, but we think it in our mind, Jesus, you just weren't in time. I asked you to help, and you just weren't in time. I prayed for you to move, and you just didn't move in time. Sometimes it seems as if it's just too late. And yet here's Jesus. And he does not always operate on our schedule. But he's always on time. He doesn't always move as we want him to move, but he always moves in his time. And his time is always right. It's always good. It's always best. Hey, he could have got to Bethany before Lazarus died. And Mary and Martha, they thought it's too late. But the truth is, he got there just in time. He got there right on time because he wasn't planning on healing Lazarus. He's planning on raising Lazarus from the dead. And when he got to Jairus' house, he wasn't late. Listen, it had never been his intention to heal Jairus' daughter and keep her from death. His intention was to bring her back from death. I mean, it's right on time. The problem is that sometimes what we see as the solution is not what God sees as the solution. The answer we're looking for isn't the answer that he's bringing, but understand something. He is always on time. Every time he is on whatever the problem is, every time he is the answer. He has the answer. Regardless of how hectic life is, how many needs we have, he always has time for us. Regardless of what time of day it is, how many times we've come to him. We have a pastor friend who went through a very bad season in life. And he'd call me. We'd be out to eat. And Jennifer would say, who is it? I'd tell her. She would say, bless her heart, take the call. Take it. He needs you. Go take the call. So I would, with her, I'd get up from the table of the restaurant, and I'd walk outside, and I'd take the call. And sometimes those calls would come a couple times a day. Have you ever been at a bad space in life, bad place, where your emotions were just messed up? And you just needed somebody to listen to you. Well, he was there. The truth is, we've all been there. And we yank on God's coattail. And we yank on his coattail. And we yank on his coattail. And he never says, give it a rest. He never says, not today. His response is never, we've already talked about this. Never. He's always got time. And if we will take the problem and put it in God's hands, we will learn he's always on time with the answer. So I don't know where you're at in life. Here's what I know. We're all human beings. And we all have problems. We all need God to do something for us that we can't do for ourselves. And every time, he's got the answer. Every time, he's got time. Every time, he is on time. And we may only see it looking back. Sometimes we read an account like this and we think, I know that. I know what happened with the maniac. I know what happened with Jairus. I know what happened with the woman. We just race to the end. But in this small sliver of Jesus' day, he was never at his wit's end, no matter who came. And he's never at his wit's end with us. Would you stand? Would you bow your head? Our pastor is going to stand before us. And it could be that there's a struggle in your life that you need to invite Jesus into. That you just need to stop and throw on the brakes on your own mind and say, I've been trying to solve this. I've been trying to find the solution. I have tried everything I know to do, and it's time. It's time for me to turn this over to him. It's time for me to acknowledge I don't have the answer, but he does. Let me give it to him. Let me come to him like Jairus came to Jesus with a problem that was bigger than him. It caused him to step outside his comfort zone, to color outside the lines that his superiors would have drawn for him. But he didn't have the answer. He came to a place where only Jesus could be his solution. And he had the answer. He always does. Every time, he has the answer. And he's got time. He's got time right now to stop and listen to you. He is big enough to run the universe and listen to our prayers. He is powerful enough to keep everything in the cosmos working exactly on order and reach his hand down into our life and meet our need. And he's always on time. He's never late. Give it to him today. Father, I pray your blessings on this time. I pray, Lord, that as your Spirit moves our hearts and our minds to bring our problems to you, that we would be submissive. That we'd quit struggling to find the answers ourselves and just bring them to you and give you ownership of our issues. Thank you, Lord, for being the God you are. We pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen.